Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Choose to Think Inspirational podcast. On the show today, we have Dana K. White, and she is the creator of the No Mess Decluttering Process and the author of actually several books. She has Organizing for the Rest of Us, Decluttering at the Speed of Life. I love that title. And How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind. She's also a speaker, podcaster, YouTuber, and much to her own surprise, a decluttering expert. She also trains and certifies decluttering coaches in her unique process at declutteringcoaches.com. Now, this all started for her back in 2009 when, in an attempt to get her own home under control, she started blogging anonymously. She's going to talk about that in our chat here in a moment. She wanted to be a writer, but her disastrous home was holding her back. Have you ever thought about that in your own life? Like there's just something that's kind of holding you back from maybe doing something else bigger and better, so to speak? Writing on a practice blog as a way to figure it all out was her compromise. And little did she know that others would relate to her lifelong struggles and benefit from the things that she shared. Today, she shares realistic home management strategies and has a message of hope for the hopelessly messy through her books, podcasts, videos, and she continues to blog. A Slob Comes Clean is the completely honest and never-ending story of her personal deslobification process. I love all these words and how she puts those together. As she finds ways to keep her home under control, she shares the truth about cleaning, organizing, and decluttering. All those strategies actually work in real life for real people like you. People who don't love cleaning and organizing, that may be you. Now, we're going to talk about her most recent book called Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy House. He Cares About Your Heart. And it's a book for you. If no matter how competent you feel in other parts of your life, you still feel overwhelmed and defeated by your messy home. I mean, our homes are our heartbeat, aren't they? Our homes are where we do the majority of our life. We live it all out there. We have our family, and they say if you can get it right in your home, you can basically get it right anywhere. So while it's true that keeping a clean and organized living space can contribute to a sense of peace and well-being, it should never, and this is the central message, it should never be equated with your worth, your moral standing, or with what Jesus thinks about you. And she's really going to hammer down on those concepts in our chat. Dana K. White, she's been trusted by millions for her no holds barred cleaning confessions and practical decluttering methods. And she wants you to remove any shame or identity crisis associated with disorganization, and more importantly, probably to help you understand God's love and purposeful design for you that is much bigger than any mess in your house. And, on the show, she's going to share relatable stories. She's going to give a few tips even, like where do you even start? Like if you're suddenly, as you listen, you're feeling a little bit of conviction, you're like, yeah, I am that person who wants to begin decluttering my home and I want to declutter my heart as well. How do I even start? Where do I start? She's going to unpack for that for you today. And she's going to help you find a sense of freedom, and she's giving you license essentially to, number one, be who God designed you to be. There are all kinds of ways to declutter, all kinds of ways to clean your home. So what fits best for you? She really does hone in on that aspect of, well, the brain that I've been given is not the brain that she has, and vice versa, or that you have. So how's God designed you uniquely to view your home and to partner with him when it comes to issues of your home and your heart? So I think you're going to come out with a deeper understanding of God's love for you and his purpose even for your heart and your home from reading that book. So I want you to go out and get a copy of that book. For sure. It's on Amazon. So you can also get it at her website, which she's going to talk about a little bit. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'm so excited for you to meet Dana K. White. Welcome, Dana, to the show.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you. And, when I first saw your book, Jesus doesn't care about your messy house.
Right.
He cares about your heart.
Yes.
And, everyone, some of my family and friends, they know me as kind of having a clean house. And I was so intrigued because I think I probably have some of the hangups that you describe in your book. I know I do regarding keeping a good house. So just maybe in a nutshell, if you could kind of tell us a little bit about why you decided to write this particular book at this particular time in your journey.
Well, I was born messy, so I have always that is my core struggle, right? Like I've always been messy my whole life. And in 2009, I started what I thought was a practice blog because I was desperate to write, but I wanted to get my house under control before I started writing. Thought it was going to take me a couple months. I used a fake name. I didn't want anyone to ever know it was me that was writing that. And I figured out a lot of things. And as I figured things out, I was also finding out that I was not alone in these struggles. I had thought I was the only person who struggled the way that I did. And so as I found other people and I saw how powerful it was to know that I wasn't alone, and then I had people telling me, thank you for letting me know that I'm not alone, that has become a big part of my passion. Yes, I teach the strategies, but I also know the power of understanding that you're not broken. You're not alone in this. Okay. And so I've been teaching this since 2009. So what are we at? Like almost 16 years now, which is crazy to me. But it was time to talk about the spiritual side of things. In the book, I talk about the reason why my first 3 books did not include spiritual content, because mixing those things together, like here's how to get your house under control and spiritual content, had always been very confusing and made me feel ashamed when I was the one really struggling. And so I just wanted to separate those things. But this shame side of things is really important to address. And so I wanted to do that. And I also, honestly, God's given me a big platform about this. And if I don't share my faith, then what is the point, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I love that aspect of your book. As a matter of fact, just how kind of seamlessly you connect the whole decluttering and, just all the aspects of your home from hostessing to actually, cleaning it and your spiritual journey. The applications were very rich, and then it kind of made them tangible because you had concrete examples to kind of support what you were saying spiritually, really. And I love that. That's kind of my jam. I try to, the Bible is one thing, but okay, how do we really apply that in our lives?
Right.
And what does that mean in practical ways? So I love that you did that.
Which is my goal, right? Like grace is all that matters, right? It's God's grace. And so this is the weird, shameful secret that God's given me to talk about. And so I'm using that as a way to explore God's grace, right? Is like, how does this play out? How does grace play out in your life using this specific example?
Okay, so tell us that. That's such a good little, go ahead, unpack that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So as I worked on my house starting in 2009, which it's not that I had never worked on it before, right? Like sometimes people are like, well, what made you start working on your house? It had always been a struggle. I had always been trying. That was the reason why it was so frustrating to me, is because I was like, I think I'm doing what other people are doing and it is not working for me. Right.
Right.
And so it was such a frustration to me. But when I started this blog, which honestly was, God gave me the idea, right? Like, I'm not going to say the blog is inspired. I'm not saying that, right? But I am saying that he gave me the idea very clearly, more clearly than almost any other life path moment that I've ever had, right? Because it was in the moment of prayer where I was saying, okay, God, why have you not answered my prayer? Why have you not taken away this issue that is keeping me from doing the thing that I feel like you're calling me to do, to write, right? And that's when God just said, write about that. And so that set me on this path. I thought that he was going to show me what I had been missing spiritually, because it felt like with this confusion. I was like, what am I missing? What is it? And so I thought, as I work on my house, God is going to show me the verse that somehow I've never read before, or, help me understand some spiritual concept that I've never grasped before. And then everything was going to be like, oh, I get it now, right? Like my house is perfect. And instead, as I worked on my house, at the same time, I had about a year before I had started reading the Bible every day. Okay. Now, I had read the Bible. I participated in Bible studies. I had been in church. I had been a missionary. It's not that I hadn't studied the Bible, but it was the first time where I'd ever been consistently in scripture. And that's life-changing, right? Like
it is.
Changed
Amen.
Everything for me. And the year when I was really coming to the point where I was accepting that this was actually the thing God had designed me to write about, this was the path he had for me, was the same time when I was really grasping and diving deep into grace, right? And like what grace is and how it's absolutely an understanding of my inability to do anything to please God, right? None of my efforts get me closer to God. And so at the same time that I was accepting that this is what I'm doing, God was showing me, this is not a spiritual issue, Dana. This is how your brain works. I created your brain to work this way. I've never looked at you and been like, oh, if Dana could just get it together in her house, then I could use her. This was the thing I wanted to use. I wanted to use the struggle, the weakness, right? And so that is the reason, like I said, why I didn't include spiritual content before, was because in my other books, because it was so important to me to not mix those things together. Because so many times the person who doesn't understand the struggle thinks that saying something like, well, God is a God of order, is going to be helpful.
Right.
But it's the opposite of helpful, because now you take, which is also out of context, right? But anyway, but you're taking this statement that is supposed to solve my problem that I have not been able to solve. And now we've layered on spiritual guilt. So now I take this thing that was already a frustration to me and was already something that felt unsolvable. And now you're basically telling me that I don't have enough faith, and then that sends me into complete despair. Right. And so that's why it was so important to me. And so that's what we're talking about in this book, is like, what does that look like? Grace is not an excuse, right, to not worry about something. But at the same time, if I am working on something and I don't fully understand grace, then I don't fully understand God, and his design of our relationship. And so it's these things, how this all works together, right? It's a very good thing to get your house under control. I've written 3 books about it, right? Like you can't say that I don't care about this. Oh, absolutely, I care. But it is not a spiritual failure, right? And so diving deep into that and understanding what God does care about, your heart, that's what it's all about.
The way that you're connecting this is so powerfully meaningful, because there can be a whole lot of shame. And we're just talking about keeping an orderly, organized, decluttered home. But there could be even other issues. Absolutely. That might seem like, oh, well, big deal. But it is a big deal, because it's like we just take on all of these negative, toxic thoughts, thinking patterns, mindsets, and then just kind of stay stuck under them. Like, well, I want to be like Sally Super Christian, and Sally Super Christian, surely she has a clean home. And because I don't, then I'm not as good as she is. Or, I don't know I struggle with this same issue, not so much with my house really, but even in playing pickleball. My husband and I play pickleball, and everyone knows I podcast, I have that platform. If they say a cuss word or something, we're like, oh, sorry, Victoria, things like that. And so, but I feel this pressure to be like, just to shine the light of Christ, and to always be this like peppy, upbeat, because I'm very competitive, but I don't want to be like snarly and rude and mean. And so I can be, And then I feel doubly guilty because I'm like, golly, I'm not shining the light of Christ. What you're doing, Dana, in a way is saying, look, Christians can have struggles even about these kinds of things.
Christians
And
do
it's
have
okay.
struggles.
They do. And it's
Every
okay.
Yes, every single person has a struggle, and Jesus wants to go straight into that struggle with you, right? Like it is not the misconception that I would say that non-Christians have looking at Christians, but also many Christians have, is that I've got to clean up myself. I've got to fix myself in order to go to God, or in order for God to use me. And in reality, he's saying, I want to be invited into exactly who you are, because I made you the way that I made you. And that's what I want to use, right? Like that's what and it's, anyway. So yes, like I get it. It's this, there's just such a, I think it's a natural thing to want to put on this
persona.
Yeah.
Almost.
Like I mean, I'm the person who did this anonymously, right? Like I did not want people to know that this was me. Like I still avoid the subject sometimes with people when I meet them, and they're like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm an author. Oh, what do you write about? And I'm like, oh, you know.
Just things, just
yeah, because if I tell people what I do for a living, I'm basically telling them my struggle, right? So
right,
it's not this thing. And I think sometimes people get that misconception, is they're like, oh, if you have a blog called A Slob Comes Clean, you must think it's great being a slob. And I'm like, no, that's not it at all, right?
Same thing here. I mean, okay, I'm in the choose to think business, but sometimes I don't choose to think. I struggle. Why do you think I'm in the choose to think business? It's because that's the passion of my heart.
Right.
I want to be, be mindful, take my thoughts captive.
Yes.
I want to be transformed by the renewing of my mind. I want the mind of Christ, all of those things, and I'm passionate about them, but that has stemmed from a deep desire to know God and let him work in my life.
Right.
And it's very messy. It's all very messy. Yeah. And if anyone thinks that, my friends will chide me like, okay, choose to think, Victoria. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. I need to choose to think. I mean, it's not that we do it perfectly at all.
Yeah.
So I, it's such an interesting topic. You've helped so many women declutter their homes. And your latest book that we're talking about, Jesus Doesn't Care About Your Messy House, it shifts the focus to how we think about our homes. And the question is, what are maybe, if you can think of these, you've not seen these questions either, so this might not be fair, but what are one or two of the most common thought patterns that keep Christian women stuck in guilt? We're talking about guilt. What keeps them stuck there in overwhelm or shame when it actually comes to managing their homes? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I used to think that the solution to my problems in my home was to be a different person than I was. Right? Like I need to be different. There are actions, of course, that I needed to be doing. But I think at the core, I was like, she's organized. It's easy for her, right? Like she just sees her space and can't leave it messy, right? I thought, okay, then I need to be like her, except that God created my brain very differently than hers, right? Like the biggest thing that I came to understand was that this is how my brain works. It is not a lack of caring. It's not a lack of trying. It's that I see my space differently. And that's actually incredibly valuable. Like we don't want everybody to be the same, right? I have a friend who, well, she'll say, she's like, I don't volunteer to do big projects because the first thing that runs through my mind is how would I get the dishes and the laundry and all this kind of stuff done? And I'm like, I am the first person to volunteer for a big project because that's my wheelhouse, right? Like that's where I can shine. And it never crosses my mind that I'm not going to have time to do my dishes and the laundry, right? Right? And so it's this mentality of, like, it's okay for my brain to work the way it works. It's not an excuse, right? For me to say, oh, well, don't worry about it. This is just how I am. Instead, it's freedom, right? Like it's freedom to actually figure out what does work because I'm embracing how God created my brain, right? And so that I would say is the biggest mindset shift. And, I hear from people on a daily basis, telling me, the impact and what they've been able to do in their homes. And I would say 99 out of 100 will have some version of, I finally realized that there wasn't anything actually wrong with me, right? Like that realization is the thing that allowed them to finally make the progress in their home, right? So accepting how your brain works. And I have to do things differently from the way naturally organized people do, because their brains work very differently from mine. And that's why I was always lost on traditional organizing advice, because I was like, what, I think I'm doing what you're saying to do, but it's just not playing out that way in my house, so I have to figure out what does work for my brain type.
Yeah, I remember, I don't know where I saw this. It could have been on your amazing YouTube channel, but it was like how we can often get burdened even by like quick tips. Like somebody might say, hey, do this. And then it's a little reel and we're like, oh, that's all it takes. And then we're like, oh, I can't even do that. And that seems so easy. And
or I do that and it doesn't have the same impact that that it looks like it had on that reel. And it's like, well, because they're, squeegeeing a shower that's been squeegeed every day. And I am squeegeeing a shower that I've ignored for a year or whatever, like
I know.
the reality is that quick tips are generally not actually a singular thing that's going to solve a backlog of, issues that's been going on for a while.
Yeah.
And then it becomes very frustrating, right?
That's right, because it's supposed to be quick and easy.
Right.
And instead it's like, nope, I'm hitting a brick wall here. So
exactly.
Yeah, that's really good. And I guess that reminds me of the comparison trap. It is so super easy to compare our homes to somebody else's and how we do it, how they do it. And so I think that can also lend itself to some of that guilt and shame, right? Because we look at, gosh, I like the whole minimalist thing. I always want to be a minimalist. I love those images. And even your bookshelves back there, I'm like, oh, they're minimal. Look at mine. I mean, see, I could say that's the way mine should be right back there. And I've just got my stuff to the,
Well, and that's where I teach, I am not a minimalist at all. Like these shelves, they're pretty minimalist, right? Because I don't need a lot of stuff back there. But I am not a minimalist. But people assume that if you talk about decluttering, you must be a minimalist.
I do. Where's the disconnect in that?
So for me, I always say, if it helps you to want to be a minimalist, great. Like if that's the thing that helps you change your home, great. What I do, I call it the container concept. Okay.
Right.
This was one of those things that I didn't know, right? And that a lot of organized people don't know, people like me don't know, right? Like it's a major communication gap between the organized person trying to help the inherently messy person. And basically it comes down to this. I thought containers were for putting things in. I thought organized people loved containers. And so I'll get me some containers and I would bring those containers home, and it never played out in my house. Like it was just a jumbled mess, right? And so I was never unorganized for a lack of containers, right? And then one day I was talking to myself, because that's what I do. That's how I've been able to build this business of talking, right? I was saying the word container, and I realized, oh, the word contain is inside the word container. Like contain as in firefighters contain a fire. They create a boundary. They can keep the fire inside the boundary. It stays under control. If it goes outside the boundary, it gets out of control. And I realized, oh, containers are not for putting things in. Containers are for limiting how much. And wonderful personality, whatever attribute that I have, I don't see limits. Like the people who struggle with clutter are not, in my experience, are generally not struggling with clutter out of greed. They are struggling with clutter out of an abundance of ideas, an abundance of great intentions, so much creativity of all the things that you could do with this. And so I would bring things in according to is this a good thing? Is this thing that's at this garage sale for $1? And if I ever actually needed it, I would have to pay $150. Like, I might as well bring it into my house, right? Because it's a good thing. So instead, when I started to view containers as limits and every space in my home as a container, every shelf, every drawer, every closet, every cabinet, everything is a limited space. And I let the space decide how much I can keep, right? Because with
That's
minimalism,
good.
if I'm thinking minimalism, then there's always the question, well, shouldn't I get rid of more? Shouldn't I get rid of more? And the person like me goes, you know what? That's a great idea. You know what? I need to be a minimalist. And then I look at my stuff and I think, I don't know. I can't do it. Right. And then I'm stuck and I'm not actually doing anything because it's so overwhelming to go from where I am to this ideal. And then there's so many things to deal with in between. But if I say, okay, the size of the shelf is the size of the shelf. So I'm going to take my least favorites out first. They may still be a favorite. I may love this item. It may be highly valuable to me and actually valuable. But the reality is, if there are other things that are more valuable to me, they deserve the space, not this. And it just takes the emotions and the arbitrary decisions out of it. And it's basically just reality acceptance, right? Like, I'm accepting the reality of this space. And if I try to keep more than will fit usably, functionally in this space, there is no hope of my house ever being under control. And so I just accept that. And strangely, when I started to see all my spaces as containers, my house no longer felt like it was too small. Like, I used to think I just don't have enough space. But when I embraced the reality of the space that I did have, I was freed from that. I was like, oh, my house is just fine. I just had more stuff than it could fit in it.
Yeah, I love that. That is a really amazing analogy, and the revelation that you had about container, and even linking that to like firefighters containing and giving priority like that. You know, recently, or about 3 years ago, I had a major move. I moved from a home where I had lived for about 20 years, and I was faced with making these really important decisions. And I just am curious, what would you say to something that, I mean, do you have anything like stuck in your closets or stored just because they're of sentimental value? Or
Absolutely.
did you ever take the position on, I struggled with that. And I thought, would someone else do better using this item than it is? I'll never use it. It's
all of those
just
are great.
Here.
Those are great mindset things, right? Like the mindset of, someone
Donating.
else can, donate it. I always say, a treasured item is not treasured if I don't actually treasure it. Like, right. If it's just up in a closet, it's not actually treasured. So I may think I'm treasuring it, but anyway, but I don't use those as my decluttering process because I have sentimental attachment to things. And also I have the kind of personality where if you tell me there's no reason, like my mannequin, right? I had a blog post early on where I was going through my space and I was like, I know that everyone in the world would tell me I don't need to keep this mannequin.
Why do you have a mannequin, Dana?
Why would you not have a mannequin, right?
Where did you get one?
I got it when I was in college and I was working at the mall one summer, and there was a men's store that was closing and they were selling mannequins for like $20. And so, I mean, why would you not buy two? I bought two,
Oh my
One of them, I have no idea where it is. But when I was a teacher, I was a theater arts teacher. I would dress it up in costumes and things. So, but I still have it. And I remember in the beginning just being like, I don't want to get rid of my mannequin. But it felt like if I'm decluttering, I should, right? Because there's no real purpose for it. But now it's become this symbol to me of, if I have this space, I can keep it. And knowing that that is the defining factor versus somebody telling me it's dumb to have a mannequin. Like, that's my personality. If you tell me that I shouldn't have a mannequin, I am going to tell you that it's my house and I can do whatever I want to do because that's how I am, right? And so I'm never going to tell you, you shouldn't have this. I train decluttering coaches, right? And we are things that we don't say. We don't say just. We don't say everyone. We don't say, like, we just avoid those because it's like, it's your space. You can keep what you want. But when I'm viewing my space as a container and I have a sentimental item that I want to keep, then it deserves space, right? And that makes it look different because I go, okay, what in here deserves space less than this item? And sometimes that's the thing that makes me think, you know what? I do love this item. It has a lot of sentimental attachment to me. But the reality is, I'm not going to keep a mannequin at the expense of my kids having winter coats, right? Like if that's the decision, then it helps me make that decision. But it's not somebody convincing me to not have a mannequin. Do you see what I'm saying? Because I will hold on tighter and I will come up with all the reasons and the explanation. So I always tell people, you can keep anything, but you can't keep everything and your house be under control. So it helps you make those decisions. And I don't have to look at the value or explain the value or defend the value of things. I just say, if I have the space, I can keep it. But if I don't have the space, then I can be sad about it, but it still needs to go if I want my house to be under control.
Yeah, I love it. And I actually love that you have a mannequin. I think that is so cool. And that is so neat. And it's refreshing, really. And I love how you put it about prioritizing. And it's okay to have things that, you know, are that you love sentimentally, because I'm very sentimental, and I sort of regret some of the, you know, the decision I made to give away certain things. But I'm like, okay, Lord, what's done is done. But
Which we all have decluttering regrets, right?
Yeah.
Like I do. That same friend that I was talking about who doesn't volunteer for big stuff because it'll, you know, I remember being in her house and she was getting rid of a chair. And I said, yeah, I have a chair that I've been going back and forth and back and forth. I've been moving it all over the house, trying to find a good spot for it. And I feel like I need to get rid of it, but I'm so afraid that I will, as soon as I get rid of it, I'll find the perfect place where I should have put it. And she goes, oh yeah, that happens to me all the time. I regret decluttering all the time. And I was like, what? But the fact is, she chooses regret over clutter, the possibility of regret. Like she knows that that's a possibility. And so I saw it as, okay, regrets may happen, but a decluttered space that I can function in is more important to me than the possibility of regret, right? And so I think fear of regret keeps us from making the changes that we need to make.
I love it. So good. You talk about finding freedom from the emotional and mental clutter, not just the physical mess. So if you could give even a few practical steps that women could take to shift their thinking about that and then experience transformation, not just in their homes, but also in their hearts. And I'll give you a little snippet of, for 2 summers, I did what I called the decluttering challenge. And it was for 1 month, and there was like one little item every day. It was more organizing, I think, though kind of decluttering at the same time. And some people, maybe I had 20 or 30 women in the challenge each summer, and it was just something I did. Why? Because I wanted to declutter. I needed to go through things. I wanted to organize that drawer. But with community, which you talk about in your book too, maybe we can get that. But with that community and everyone doing it and sharing their photos, it was, we were all jazzed up about it. But in addition to those practical things, I combined that with our thoughts and then decluttering our brains. What are those toxic thoughts and what can we kind of clear out of our mind as we're decluttering? Can we kind of think about this too? So and that was just a challenge, but do you have any steps that, where would we even start with something like that? Someone in the audience is saying, yes, I want to kind of declutter both because I have hangups in both issues, but I don't know where to start. So what would you tell her?
I would say go ahead and start with the physical decluttering, because that I think there's a lot of times this idea that I need to fully understand why I have all this stuff. I need to fully understand everything, and how it's going to work and how this is going to change me and how all this before I get started. When in reality, the actual action of clearing the stuff is the thing that helps me see what's most important to me, right? Like when I'm actually faced, instead of going, well, what's going to be most important to me, a mannequin or the winter coat? Like that's okay, but what about? But when I go to the actual physical space and I'm faced with these two things, then it reveals itself what's more important. So the place I would say to start when you're decluttering is to go to the most visible space in your home. And I consider that to be the place where guests would enter your home. Okay.
Like the foyer? Like the
Yes.
foyer?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes. Go there first,
Okay.
because the natural tendency when you get inspired to declutter is to go
Kitchen.
tackle the linen closet or some obscure
Okay.
drawer or whatever. And I think that what happens is you're thinking, okay, we don't use this space very often. If I work here, maybe it'll actually stay decluttered, right? You know, like I think there's that going on. But the reality is, if you do something obscure, then you're going to spend all this time, you're going to work, you're going to put forth energy. And at the end of that time, your home is still going to be out of control. Okay. Now, I'm specifically talking to the person who is truly struggling with their home, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
if you work on this obscure place, then you know, your husband comes home from work or your kids come home from school or whatever. And they're like, what have you been doing? Oh, I've been decluttering. And you see their eyes kind of go, really? Like, you know, and that is so defeating for the person who this is a big deal to. So if you work in a visible space, what will happen is you will see the progress that you've made. That progress will inspire you to declutter again sooner and will increase and perpetuate your decluttering energy versus feeling defeated by nobody being able to see that. The other thing that happens too is you'll start to experience what it's like to live with less stuff. You'll start to experience that you're more willing to open the front door when somebody comes to the door, right? Because it's no longer an embarrassment, right? And that experience is incredibly valuable in helping to inspire you to keep going, and then keep going through your house. Next most visible space. So, and that's how you can make it all the way to the end, right? Like the goal is to get through everything, but having those living spaces done first makes living easier. Being easier will totally change your perspective on your stuff when you realize how much it was making life harder in your house.
Wow. You know, it's like a quick win, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's doing that foyer, getting that done, and having others even notice, your loved ones, the family members. It's and you like, oh wow, it's really a quick win. I have one of my friends, when she or I feel overwhelmed, I always remember what she told me. I'll never forget it. She's a dear friend, and she's like, Victoria, just do laundry. And I was like, oh, okay, I can do that. Yeah. Though I am distraught, depressed, anxious, whatever's going on, I can pick up the clothes and do a load of laundry. And after I did that, suddenly I felt like that was a quick win. It was so simple, but just do laundry. Or, you know, for her, it was just do the dishes.
That's what
stockpiled her dishes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she stockpiled her dishes, and it's something I never did. So for me, the dishes, I'm like, there are no dishes down there anyway. But laundry, I've always got laundry, it seems. So, and I think I read about that you have a whole thing on starting, that might be your, like I can't think of what you called it, but the 5 things where you start decluttering, something like that. It's a little handout I think I subscribed.
I have a 5-step decluttering process. That's my no mess decluttering process. But as far as like when you're just feeling overwhelmed in your home, start with the dishes, because the dishes have to be done, right? You know, I know there are people who will say things like, you start by making your bed. Like that's the most important thing. But I am proof that you can still go to bed at night, even if you didn't make your bed that morning, right? But the reality is, if you don't do the dishes, then it does halt everything in your kitchen, right?
That's
and so it does make everything harder to do. And so that's why starting with the dishes is so incredibly powerful. That's where I started when I did not know what to do. I was like, I don't know what the deal is. But every time I go to clean my house, I start in the kitchen. It takes me 5 hours to catch up, and I never get to the rest of the house because I use up all my time and energy. And so I was like, I'm just going to try to do, and I could not believe the impact and the power of doing the dishes every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a real stickler on that. My husband is like, Victoria never goes to bed with dishes in the sink. Now I do. There are days, but I like my morning Victoria to walk into, grab my coffee and everything's in place. It's so my nighttime Victoria, though she feels tired, it's going to help me the next morning a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's the way I look at that.
My brain type is, it literally does not cross my mind. Like it just doesn't cross my mind. Oh, nope. Like I don't see the messy kitchen at night, does not even. Now I know from experience, right? Like I know from experience the hard way, both knowing the impact of running my dishwasher every night versus when I skip, whatever, that is my motivation. It is not because I see it and it drives me crazy. I don't see it. That's the thing. Is I always tell, I don't see incremental mess. I see perfectly clean and I see overwhelmingly messy. I don't see how it's getting that way. So that's a lot of my strategies are helping me deal with it before it gets out of control, right? Like it's things I have to put in place in order to prevent me from getting to that space where I'm very overwhelmed.
Yeah, it is so curious. I love how you're talking and giving license to every single person. And that's the grace that we kind of started out with, even to just be who you are as God designed you. For me, if I walk into my bedroom and the bed's not made, I feel like it's an energy drain for me. It's a leak. And I don't have any idea why really, although I was kind of a neat kid growing up. I mean, my room was kind of on the neat side and I like things organized. Maybe it's more controlling or something. I don't know. But
it's great. Like, I always say, like, don't change it. If you're, I run my dishwasher at night and after dinner and then empty it in the morning. And I'm like, but if you have a dishes routine that works, do not switch to what you heard me say. Do you know what I mean? Like, go with what works for your personality. One of the things that a lot of people tell me is so freeing is like, I just say, do the dishes at some point during the day. Even if you don't do them before you go to bed, like that is not the answer, doing them before you go to bed. The answer is doing them every day. And that may look different to all different types of personalities. And it's like, whatever it is, or work schedules. I had somebody who I was doing a session with, and she was working overnight, like she was a nurse and had these overnight shifts and things. And so she had it in her mind that she had to come home exhausted and do the dishes before she went to bed. And I was like, no, of course you don't, right? Like, of course you don't. The issue for what I call dishes math, which is 1 day's worth of dishes is 15 to 20 minutes. 2 days worth of dishes is an hour. It doesn't just double. It like goes way beyond that, right? And 3 days worth of dishes is hours. I'm like, the issue is just finding a time to do them during the day. When you assign a time, my personality is like, oh no, I was supposed to have done the dishes last night before I went to bed, and it never crossed my mind to do that. So tonight, I've got to do it, right? And then I put it off until tonight, and then I forget again because it's just not something that crosses my mind. So instead, it's like, no. In the moment when I notice this thing, that's when I'm going to do it, instead of coming up with this ideal time. And that's so much more effective in actually moving me forward than waiting and trying. That was me trying to be a different person. Today, I'll be a different person and actually notice the kitchen before I go to bed. I'm not going to be a different person. It's self-defeating.
I love it. It's like ditching these self-imposed or others imposed restrictions.
Yes.
And what you have so cleverly done, Dana, is you're like, wait a minute, let's think about this. Let's begin to look at this in a different way. Let's think about this in a different way, because we can get the same result, really, getting the dishes done. But in one way, we've kind of got our joy. We're not like just trapped under, gosh, I didn't do it last night. No, all of that stuff either. So I love how you've done that. And let's kind of keep going with okay, that's where we start, decluttering our houses and everything. But how do we start with the whole heart thing? Where do we go from there?
Yeah, I think it's the understanding of who God is, what it is that he's actually looking for from us, which is for us to see that his holiness is what matters. It is not my efforts, right? If I am thinking it's my efforts, I'm not actually understanding who he is and what he's asking of me. And so as far as your heart, focus on God, focus on learning who he is, learning what he says in scripture. Start reading in the book of John is a great place to read, because you're getting to see who Jesus is and how he actually interacted with people. And that's where you're going to learn what it is that God is like, right? And the more that we know God, the more we understand who we are in relationship to God and our need to, give him everything.
Yeah. I love it. Well, I'm just having a little curious question too. Is there like a favorite chore that you do, or do you now have any favorites or anything like that?
Favorite?
Like, some people say I don't like scrubbing the tubs and stuff like that in the showers. Yeah. I would rather vacuum all day long than go in there and clean my bathrooms.
Yeah,
Do you have any thing like that?
I would say I don't like emptying the dishwasher, but I sure do love sparkly dishes that went in there dirty. Like that does give me a little like, these look so good. They're so beautifully clear and all that. I will say that like the answer is not learning to love it, right? Like, because that was the thing is I totally thought that when people said make it a habit to do your dishes, that at some point, if I did them enough, I would be like, oh my word, I just did my dishes. I didn't even realize it. Like a bad habit where you don't realize you've done it. And
That's right.
And so thinking that was what I was going toward actually never got me anywhere, because that never has happened for me, right? Like I still don't love it. I still have to remind myself. I still have to go, this is the thing I have to do if I want things to not get out of control, but just acknowledging that, oh, okay, it's never going to be that way. And that's fine.
Yeah, it is fine. I love that. And, your book just released like relatively recently. Did it
Actually,
not?
It comes out next week. Yeah.
Oh, it's
February. I'm not sure when this comes out, but
this is the 4th. Mm-hmm. That's right. Okay, good. Yeah, that's right. Because I went to Amazon and it was like, it had the pre-order thing. That's right. Yeah. So we're a little bit ahead of the game, but I was gonna actually talk about how it was received or what feedback you might have had. But yeah, that's right. You're right. If Jesus doesn't care about our messy house, what does he care about when it comes to how we approach home and hospitality? And how can we shift our mindset to what really matters?
Our heart, like he does. He cares about our heart. If I let someone into my house when it's less than perfect, then that's out of a heart meant to serve the other person, right? And so that's what God wants from me. If I let them in and think, oh no, I'm not going to worry about my house, that's their problem, they shouldn't judge me, well, then that's wrong on my part again, because that's pride and selfishness, right? And so always looking at how am I representing God to others, okay? Not through me being perfect, right? But through me being concerned for their heart and for their understanding of Jesus' love for them, right? And so anytime that it's my pride that's preventing me from doing something, then that's my check where I know, you know what? I need to let that go and, make the other person the more important thing in this situation.
Mm-hmm. Have you done that recently? Like where maybe somebody was going to come over and you're like, no, let's meet at Panera or something like that?
I can't think of a time. I definitely have had times where my husband is the sweetest and he's the best. And he's the reason I've been able to do this with my life, right? Because I'm like, so you're not more embarrassed of this, honey? Like what in the world, But he's like, oh, so-and-so had to come over to help me with such and such. And they just walk through the kitchen and I was like, no, you're not supposed to say it like this, right. Whatever. And I have decided that partly, my house is, well, not partly, mostly my house is so much better, right? Like it's under control, right? Like it's not the disaster because there's just so much less stuff in it that even if everything was out of place, it still wouldn't be anywhere near what it used to be, right? But, so that makes it easier to let people in, but also in those moments like that, where somebody comes in or needs to come in and I'm like, oh no, like I didn't get any warning at all. And they're walking through and it's embarrassing. I now know how important it is for people to see a lack of perfection. They need to see reality. Maybe the kitchen is not their struggle, but they still need to see, oh, Dana's not perfect. I can't imagine that anybody thinks I'm perfect, but you know what I mean? I mean, like,
I know
like
exactly
they
what you
need to
mean.
see that we're living real life and that we have real struggles, and that, yes, I write about this stuff and 99 times out of 100, we're great and you can come on in. But there are definitely days where it's like, what in the world happened in here? Because that's how my brain
Life.
works, right? I zero in on something while the house gets out of control. I zero in on something like launching a book or whatever. And it just makes everything hard around me. But that's okay, right? Like it's okay because it's more important to be open and honest than it is to try to put up this, perfect
Facade about,
exactly.
because I'm the decluttering
Right.
queen or whatever, then yes, my house is constantly, this way or that way. I really, really appreciate that. This kind of the way we're wrapping things up here, because the real beauty in being authentic, as you've described, is that it then gives people a glimpse into what it is to have had the struggle or still having the struggle or the desires that you have for your home and your house. They see you in the struggle, and there's almost no better way to really glorify God, because they know, it's like Jesus in the trenches with you. You're there duking it out and trying your very best, but others can see you through the struggle, being a human being authentic and real. And that in and of itself is really powerful. And it's a wonderful invitation into, gosh, it's messy, it's dirty, we have the goal, but it's not that we always live 100% of the time right there, bullseye, game on. Sometimes there's a lot of stuff going around in the midst of that, but that's okay too. And we can still I'm thinking also back to me on the pickleball court, where I have my women's doubles partner as well as my husband. They know how much I struggle with my thoughts and mindsets on the court, in part because I have a platform in the area. People know me. They, oh, she's a Christian. If they know nothing else about me, they know that I'm a Christ follower, and I feel such responsibility there. But I can't fill those shoes like maybe other people might expect me to. I just can't, because I am human. But what I hope that people see is, in this struggle that I have, to, not get in my amygdala, as I call it, and just be so fear-based, emotionally driven and all that. At least they know that I've invited God into that process, and he's with me, guiding me, helping me, even though it's really, really messy and not always pretty. And there's something to be said for that.
Absolutely. I hear from people a lot who will tell me that it is more helpful for them to see that I still have struggles, right? Like to know, and it's kind of contrary to what you think.
Yes.
But when people say, I see you mess up, I see you have to go back and declutter a space that you decluttered before, and it's gotten cluttered again, and you go back and you deal with this space again, they're like, that is actually more helpful to me, because it shows me that just because I decluttered this space and this space got cluttered again, it is not a failure. It's how life goes, right? And you just keep on going. Like, because I used to be the same way. I would be like, well, I've tried this method and it at some point I fell off or whatever happened, and I was like, well, I got to find a whole new method. It's like, no, I just got to keep going, right? I just got to keep doing the thing. And that's just how it is. That's how reality is.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times did Paul talk about, I keep doing this thing I don't want to do, and I don't do the thing I want to do. And I'm like, that's reality, and if we pretend that's not the case, we're not helping anyone.
Amen. My goodness. So good. Such a wonderful and inspiring message that you have offered the listeners today, Dana. And tell everyone where they can reach out to you and get in touch with you and find out more about you. Get your book, all of it.
Yeah, you can, as long as you Google Dana K. White and not just Dana White, you're going to find me. So just enter Dana K. White anywhere, because there's a man named Dana White. That's not me.
Okay.
So anyway, that's
so
what
the
you're
letter
gonna find.
K, Dana.
The letter K
White.
is important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So put the K in there. And you can go to aslobcomesclean.com. That's my website, where you'll find my YouTube and podcasts and coaches and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah. And I know you just did this book, but do you have something else on tap?
Yeah, I have another book due in 3 months, but I'm excited about it. It's kind of a new subject to tackle, so I'm excited about that one. So
can you tell us what that might be?
I'm not quite ready to tell what it's about, but yes, it's.
Okay.
I think it's going to be fun. Of course, it won't be out for another year and a half or so.
Sure. Sounds so fun. Well, we'll have to have you back on the podcast.
Yeah, I would love
once that other book, the next book, comes out.
Thank
that
you.
would be so fun. So, but thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your story, for giving us some really practical tips on just what is this whole messy home and God after our heart. I so appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.